Hey, good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the curriculum committee meeting for 10/28. Let the record show that all members are here. Along with Tim Shell, Amy Johnson, Lynn Severance, Mike Savell, and Jeff Keenis. Approval of the agenda.
Second.
And Dr. Brown. Sorry. I don't believe we have any public comments, and so that takes us to agenda number 5, update on the new 6th period middle school schedule.
Good afternoon. I did bring a couple different copies of what the schedule looks like, so I'll pass them around. This one here is just broken down by teams. You can see how this is what usually people find most useful, but this is the mathematical probably fits in with the lunches and stuff. So feel free to pass it on and look at it. If anybody wants me to send them copies of this, I'm happy to do so, but it's on the website too and whatnot. First of all, thanks again for your support for the schedule change. I mean, it was a lot of time invested on people doing it also at the board level and your support financially to get this thing running. We have had 2 months in schedule. We've been able to get through things fairly well. I think there's still, of course, anything, a learning curve as people get used to things and adjust accordingly. We have 40-ish more hours of time in your core instruction. You're going to have to do some things differently. And when you lose a few hours in our encore classes, you're going to also do something. So these are the things we knew were coming. So first of all, I think the positives are, first, the more time in classes we knew would be a good thing. And we're getting some good response from our core teachers on that. A lot of our core teachers shared with us how much they appreciate the time and how it feels being able to get things done in that longer time frame. It's super helpful additionally because we had just started our ELA Amplified curriculum this year. And we're looking at new math curriculum this year as pilots. We'll start that next year. All the curriculum we're looking at is set up for 60-minute classes. So our new schedule is 59 minutes, which works much better than 44 minutes. So the schedule is going to actually benefit us as we look at curriculum as well. So most of the curriculum out there is set up for those longer periods. We are starting to really shift how we use the time during the class period. So we're trying to get ourselves where the students are engaged more doing the work, either in pairs, groups, bouncing back and forth between some teacher directions, get kids working on things, whereas in 44 minutes, by the time you did an intro, teacher shares some things, you used to have a lot of time to get some of those more engaging and in-depth activities going. We're starting to move in that direction. Some of our teams have really glommed onto that. Some of us are still working through some adjustments with the curriculum we're doing in Tally and how that's going to look, but they're eager to do so, which has been a very big positive. This is my opinion. I think some others share it. The feel of the building is different this year. And just walking through the building, it's a little less hectic. Our hallways are far cleaner. There's not kids just out in the hallways as much as they were in the past years, which has been great so far, which keeps us where we need to be. Kids in the classrooms are learning. It's quieter. And I think when kids know that they can dig in and get after something, it just seems to be what we knew in less transitions was probably going to be good, and we're seeing that so far. The teacher feedback from our teachers is very, very positive. And my one-on-one study that I've had so far, they seem embarrassed to say it sometimes, right? Chat. I was hoping so, because last thing I want to do is bring a schedule that's going to make all the teachers upset. So that's been going very well. And then I think at the end of the day too, our teachers are starting to feel like they get to know the kids better. Because they're with them for 60 minutes, they can start learning what their needs are, so they can learn to know them as people, but also they can learn them about them as learners, and then respond accordingly. So that extra time is helping us in that respect as well. Those are some of the early things we've heard from teachers for the schedule. So those are the positives. Challenges, I think we knew a lot of these challenges coming in. One of the things, of course, was our encore classes. We knew we were going to lose some time there. Plus, they're going to be less frequent. And I would tell you, the encore classes are still feeling a little bit of that as they try to figure out. Some weeks they only see the kids once because it's 1 out of 3 days, and so by the time you rotate through, that's a rough one. And then because we're using music lessons in there as well, with pulling kids out of class, You have to be very careful because you pull a kid out of a class that's an encore class, that's the one day they meet that week, then they don't see those kids at all that week. So our music team had spent a lot of time this summer trying to come up with a small group instruction model and schedule that would work well in this schedule. There's still some things they're working out, but they've been really good about collaborating with staff. When staff say, hey, like I really can't have a kid leading because we're setting up a science lab and the kid leaves, we can't replicate the science lab. And music tries to do the lessons during like the wind time or some of the time to navigate. That's so our music team has been great about being flexible, but also trying to make sure they're still maintaining fidelity with their small group instruction. But that the loss of homeroom we knew would be something to navigate because our students don't have as much time to still work on homework during the school day, and things like music lessons, student services lessons, and speech were things that we frequently did during homeroom, and we just don't have the perfect model for that yet, other than pulling a lot of classes at different times. So I'll tell you the 2 out of 3 days for our Spanish 2 and our the rotational classes at the 7th grade level, that is working, but we're realizing that it does jam up the schedule a little bit because when you have 2 out of 3 days, you have to try to find something to put in that third day. And so that gets challenging when you're trying to put the pieces together in the master schedule. And we knew that schedule was gonna be tricky, but that added a little bit of something special back in the spring and this summer. And I think for our teachers, the hard part is if you're teaching in a 3-day rotation, you might be teaching on a day 2, the first day for some of your classes, but the second day for some of the other classes. It's feasible depending on the schedule falls. You could start like first period, I'm teaching day 1, but then 3rd and 4th period, I'm teaching day 2, and then 6th period, I'm teaching day 1 again. So you're gotta keep track of which kids you're teaching, what day you're on, which it's something that's there this year that wasn't there in the past. So that's a challenge. And of course, just losing some curriculum time, which we knew they were all going to lose about 8 hours of curriculum time. So they're navigating what to squeeze in and how to make it work. And the only other challenge I have besides those 2 things with the homeroom and the encore classes would be supervision. We've heard from staff that they feel like the supervision of the hallway and the bus supervision that we put in kind of to offset the increased prep time they have to try to balance the fact to where they were before. They feel like we're getting some people who feel like that's been a little taxing to start this career. So that's why there was a request that there was from someplace there was a concern about the discrepancy between prep time at the middle school, the new schedule, and where it's at the elementary and high school. So try to bring that back. That's why that's there. Yeah. I will share again personal opinion. It is nice to have staff walking through the hallways and just kind of making sure kids are where they're supposed to be and engaging kids in a positive way. It's nice to have staff in the lunchroom engaging with kids and checking in with them and talking to them. I mean, so although it's a thing to do, there's some other positive benefits that come with it other than just serving the supervision needs of the schools. Anything you guys like to add, Lynn?
I think the only other thing that I would add is in regards to the challenge of the supervision that from some students, some of the things that have come out is a greater sense of just feeling safe. You know, in today's world, we know how some students are affected by the events that, you know, unfortunately have happened in schools, that they just feel like there's always a trusted adult that is around, because it is very visible now that teachers have. It's one of the positive things of the challenge.
How many teachers do you have in the hallway rooms?
The idea was kind of like to have one up, one down, like they can go back and forth just to kind of have some coverage. Questions from me?
So for the hall supervision, I apologize if I didn't quite pick it up. Do the teachers rotate, or are all teachers expected to be in the hallway during passing time? How do you work that out?
So during passing time, that's separate from the supervision. That's just a general expectation that in between classes, staff should be present in the hallways, and that's outside of the supervision talking about that is assigned during the actual periods. So yeah, staff should be by their doors for the most part during passive time. And by and by, many of them are have been even before we did some of the change. But the actual hallway supervision, some staff are on hallway first semester, some are on lunch first semester, and then it'll flip at semester. So like, not everybody knows you have to do lunch and everybody, but the hallway was, it might be a preference for one or the other, this way everybody's doing the same. Over the course of the year.
But it does rotate, it's either once every 3 days or once every 2.
And lunch today in the meeting. That mean?
It's new as a widespread assignment for all staff. We've had lunch supervision based on some other things where staff who have some space in their schedule when they get work. We've had staff had to do it, but we now having all staff do it, that's.
So with their supervision, what is their?
So every, you want to take this one?
Yep. So with the supervision. So we have that, I can share with you people that it's. It went from 90 minutes per day to 2 hours per day. So we had to find a way to. So 2.5 hours extra, 2.5 hours extra per week. So we had to find a way to build in supervision to offset that. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's 2.5, but it's probably close to 2 hours per week. The supervision by offset 2.5 hours. And I say about this because on a 6-day rotation, I won't get the same every week.
So if, is there any other supervision besides Albany?
We've always had AM PM supervision.
Bus.
Right, so 20 minutes before, 13 minutes after that rotates also. And staff at 6 weeks per year.
So like second time for training supervisors, you can train this guy. If you don't do this.
Then with the Spanish program, did they end up getting an extra days so that they have 3 days out of the 6 versus? When this first came up, I know they were concerned that they were going to be short time. And that would affect the advanced Spanish kids who are looking to be through freshman, what is that, Spanish 3 or whatever it happens to be a freshman level by the end of their 8th grade level. So did they end up, did he find a way to adjust the schedule so they picked up 1 extra section a day or they, what the same thing that was set up at the beginning?
So the short answer is no.
Okay.
The longer answer is longer than no. It really is, we didn't move it. We know that was a concern. We were gonna go through this year and kind of see how things went.
Okay.
Spanish 2 was every other day last year for 44 minutes for a total of 132 minutes over 3 days, essentially. Now they meet 2 out of 3, which is essentially 2 out of 3 is 120 minutes almost. So there's still a few minutes short, but you're also a little more efficient because you don't have the transitions. So Spanish 2 is probably close to a wash. I think the bigger concern was with our other level classes that met every other day, but that went to every 3 days. We're meeting to talk about that, I believe, next month.
Yeah, in about a week and change.
Yeah, I guess next month is on Friday. Yeah, so like, the thing with the truth of the matter is we can look at it. The hard part is, one, when you go to 2 out of 3 for anything, it does 2 things. One, I already told you about, which is the scheduling.
Yeah.
Because everything's 2 out of 3, then nothing's 1 out of 3, and you can't put anything in that other spot. The other thing that happens is we were trying to, with this schedule, maintain the middle school philosophy of exposing kids to a lot of different things at the middle school level with tech ed, business, FCS, and then so on. If you go to 2 out of 3, you start limiting what kids are exposed to at the middle school. So if you do that, then you start taking away electives. So that means kids' ability to be exposed to other things goes down, especially at the 8th grade level. Does that make sense?
It does. So in terms of making adjustments, flexibility is very limited with the schedule.
It's limited. The PE would have to probably stay 1 out of 3 no matter what we did, just to make sure you have something there. You'd have to probably find something else that you forced to stay at 1 out of 3. If you're gonna move other things to 2 out of 3, so now you're gonna say to people, you need to have 2 out of 3, you get to be 1 out of 3. And I mean, why doesn't even said that creates some tension or some empathy?
And we may get to this meeting, I mean, we're gonna pose the question. If there is a consensus in the elective areas team to pursue the question, we're gonna pursue it in all of its complications. We may find that there's not a consensus to do it, but I mean, as you've heard, Jeff's, the first biggest operational question is what is opposite if you're 2/3 and everything moves to 2/3? Biad can only match up some of those 1/3. So then I might be teaching, hypothetically my class, I might be seeing my class first period some days and second, I mean, would have to do some weird things. I shouldn't say weird, that's not asset based. We'd have to do some creative things to make it balance. And those creative solutions might offset some of the instructional advantages of the greater time, just in terms of maintaining things in a good sequence. And then, of course, the other piece is if you force students and their families, what a change in the model would be more instructional time in the electives that you have, but taking fewer electives. We don't know that if you have fewer slots to fill on your electives, that families would make the same distribution of elective choices that they historically have, which might mean we need to add FTE in some areas. And then historically, we've been really, quite frankly, historically, we've held people harmless. But that depending on what that looks like, that's not inexpensive. So, there are operational considerations and then there would be FTE considerations. So first we need to find out if there's an interest in us even examining these options. And if there isn't, we'll stop. But if there is, then we'll work to bring viable options forward. But we also know it's just not quite that simple. There may be questions around staffing, fiscal notes, things like that. Is that kind of a fair summary? Yeah.
It is. We can look at it. I mean, at the end of the day, I think when we brought this cover forward, we knew world language might be something that we'd have to look at, not just even at the middle school, maybe like more programmatically 5A, how we might make sure that works out as part of something we brought up to the discussion at the beginning of this process. So I think we can keep looking at those things, but that was one of the, when you look at those were some trade-offs for getting more time into our core classes. Like at some point you have to realize we're going to add time to core, it has to go someplace else. If you decide you want to treat like the language, whether it's Spanish or French or all of them as another core, in a 5-period day, you now really have decided it's at 1 period where they can take electives and that's it. It's on a rotational basis, which we either have to have PE. Now you're done with electives. It's hard to decide language.
So Jeff, will the new school with more space alleviate some of the scheduling problems, or is this just symptomatic of the classes you can offer and the teachers you have to fill them?
I think it will help a little. I think the hard part is the rotation of the on-course through everything, and then we do the 2 out of 3 with, in 7th grade as part of our, excuse me, we call them pod classes, but it's our business tech and A and SES rotation. We do that because we put them in quarterly things. We could go back to taking them semesters and running them every 3 days and pull them back out too. We did it more for an efficiency thing 3 or 4 years ago. And so, I mean, there's other things to look at because we do things that way for whatever reason it is with those classes, but we can look at it differently. That might free up some space too. I think the new building is going to help us because right now we have a lot of staff sharing a lot of rooms, especially our core teachers.
Yeah.
The scheduling piece of it is less of a space issue as it was more putting the puzzle pieces together for the schedule. Because we're trying to keep kids in teams and we're trying to offer a robust set of electives and we're rotating them through, there's just a lot of things that have to fall just right for that to work nicely.
In general, I heard Spanish means 2 out of 3, but in general, like an art class, how often do they meet in a 6 day?
They meet 1 out of 3 days or 2 out of 6 days. So we're on really a 3-day schedule, but we put it on a 6-day schedule so that parents who are coming up K6, they're used to a 6-day rotation. We stay with the 6-day rotation. We're just going through a 3-day rotation flight. That way,
So most of them meet 1 out of 3 and stuff.
yeah, only Spanish 2. So even like our intro Spanish class is only 1 out of 3. Yeah.
In general.
Only Spanish 2 is the only class that meets 2 out of 3.
And the reason for that is if you went back to last year, all of these other classes were every other day. If you used to be every other day, you're every 3rd day. Spanish 2 had been a daily. Now it's 2 out of 3, because had it been an everyday, then you would have been, if you were in 8th grade taking Spanish 2, you are taking Phi-Ed, you're taking health, and you've got 1 other elective spot on the bus. And so with 2 out of 3, you get the second elective. Well, obviously the world language elective, but there's an additional. So.
That's.
And we're going to, once we get to the end of the semester, we'll put together a survey for staff to ask them like, so how are things going? What are some things you're seeing? What are some suggestions you have? Now that you've done it for a whole semester, what are you feeling and seeing? Because what I'm feeling and seeing as a principal is one window. And although I like to think everybody shares all their thoughts with me about things, they don't always. So especially if they think it's, if they think it's, against the new schedule, they don't want to share it. But we'll just put on an anonymous survey on some information for people, see what people are saying. It's funny, our 8th grade teachers are saying like, yeah, our kids are really missing homeroom. Our 7th grade teachers are like, our kids don't know there wasn't. So it's like, and so I think, there's that piece of things too, where like, once you've had, you're used to, and change is hard, no matter if you're 5 or 50, like, and everything in between. And so, as we get through this, I think some of those things too will start to iron themselves out. I'll tell you, another piece to this is people say, well, what are we gonna get our homework done? Well, one of the things we're gonna start working towards is we have these 16 minutes during the day. What are we doing to make sure we're maximizing those 16 minutes? So we're not sending kids home with so much work to do because we have this time in the classroom, because it is hard for kids, things that they got going on. We don't need them going home with 2 to 3 hours of homework a night when we can make sure we're maximizing our time and engaging people with the really important things at school, because now we have time to do it, and giving them things that are either minimal or very easy to engage with at home. So they don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all the hard work at home and I don't have any support. So we're trying to flip that around a little bit, which will help as well. But that doesn't happen a day is to new schedule, because that's about instructional practice and time. And instructional practice is something that you have to help push people through and help them get used to.
So in general, last year, I'm still going to figure all these numbers out. Last year, teachers taught 6 out of 8 periods.
Correct.
And now they're teaching 4 out of 6 periods.
Correct. Well, teachers had kids 6 out of 8 periods. Our core teachers taught 5 out of 8 and had a homeroom the other one for their 6th. Our encore teachers taught 6 each day. They did not have a home.
So I'm a little confused, as you said, there's no homeroom, but you have that universal room to start the day. What is that called? When?
Yeah. Well, it's when and advisory, we run advisory on the 1st and 3rd student days of the week.
Okay.
Yeah, so on a normal week, Monday, Wednesday, yeah.
So last year, Mark, and in preceding years, not only did we have the advisory when
But there's no actual
we had a
special
homeroom on top of that,
Okay,
and that was a lot of non-academic time. You know, so we've maintained the win time, we've maintained the advisory. You know, we were compared to the vast majority of schools low on academic time, particularly in the core. And so this new schedule is a big change. A lot of work went into it, I think, given the significance of the change, it's off to a really good start, but it was purposefully designed to bring a lot more instructional minutes to the core. Now, it's also, you know, improved kind of the flow of the day, fewer transitions, our instructional blocks of time are longer. And so if you're an elective teacher, your time of instruction has been affected to the downside to varying degrees, but when you've got kids, you've got them for longer, which again, if you're doing more of a lab-based hands-on activity, that's all to the good. If you're a core teacher, you've got more total time, you have the bigger blocks of time, and because of the way the schedule works with 4 periods of instruction versus 5 periods of instruction, and we added the additional staffing to keep class sizes within policy, your overall student load is modestly reduced. So that, I mean, what we did was a big change, targeted really on our core content areas, more time, bigger chunks of time, and slightly reduced student loads for core teachers. Now, we don't have data yet that shows us if it's having the impact that we're seeking, which is to increase learning in the core subjects. But that's why we're doing all of this.
Like I heard you say, 2.5 hours of prep time, is that every?
additional prep from that. So last year, everyone got 2 periods off at 44 minutes each, so 88 minutes a day. This year, those 2 preps that they're off, those 2 periods have 59 minutes, so it's.
But 2 hours every staff member, every day?
Every day. It's
Okay.
plus, it's-
Just to come out.
Those are so,
Wow, pretty much.
10 hours of back after the last 7.5 hours. So 2.5 hours.
Oh,
Does,
thank you.
does that include the encore classes in as well, that they ended up with more prep time than in the past? Okay, just because. Right. Well, it seems like it's off to a good start or a great start. I think it'll be really interesting at the end of the semester to get kind of a more in-depth look at staff reaction to particularly the encore. Okay, so it's fewer minutes, but we have more quality minutes. Does that balance things out? Or how much are we accomplishing? But so I'll be looking forward to that, but it's I'm grateful for the endeavor you guys embraced, and Joan and I both went to this 1,000 years ago at the high school, when we went from traditional to block, and it's actually, I think we had 2 iterations of it in that first year. And so there's a learning curve, but, I think by the time we were done, there wasn't, if there was any teacher that didn't want to do it, is a small minority. I think we saw the benefits of it, and I'm hoping
Nobody wants.
you'll find the same thing.
With independent, but this is what's happening, it's right. But
Yeah, I think it's the right move. If we're really trying to do it more in line, kind of spending more instruction at our school and maintain to the degree that we can the exposure to electives. I mean, this is the best we're gonna do. We looked at a lot of options and all of them had different trade-offs. So you could go to longer blocks of math than ELA, but then you decrease your elective options, and there's a great argument for doing it. If there was a perfect schedule, we'd all run the same way. And so I think this is for what we want to do and what has been shared with us, our goals are as a district. This seems to be the best option we had, and I think we'll continue to, like, as I've been telling all the staff, we're going to continue our year of action research. Next year, we're going to continue another year of action research, because we're just going to keep learning how this works for us and try to do things that we can to make it work. The music lessons, the guidance lessons, the speech therapy stuff are all things that we just got to keep thinking about how we can do. We've had some people who are sharing concerns about their kids being pulled out of the second half of a class, and I've shared with them. We picked up 42 hours of instruction. By doing that, we sacrifice a homework period.
Yeah.
If your kid has to miss the second half of each of their core classes once a quarter to make this work, you still get 40 more hours than you had last year. And hopefully kids can handle and navigate missing that second half of that class. It's not ideal, but it's better than, getting it out of it. The homeroom was great for the music lessons and the other stuff, but it was a lot of fun that we were being efficient with. And I think this gives us a better chance at being efficient, which means we have some trade-offs to work around. And if people have great ideas, we're gonna be all ears, try to make it work the best we can.
So help remind me, so did we also start both new math and new ELA curriculum this year, or is that one this year, one next year?
New ELA started this year, piloting math this year. We'll start math.
I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into the intent of creating an instructional schedule that in our area of action instead of impact activity. So I appreciate that. And then the implementation phase that we're in right now, so that I can research, this linking that to ultimately impact, right? So intent, implementation, and then impact. So I appreciate the conversation we've been able to have to get to that stage. So, need a little time will tell.
Yeah. We do, but I think that our staff put a lot of time in, so kudos to them as well. And quite frankly, kudos to them because this is a big change and they're handling it very, very well. And even though they share me, well, this is where it's not going well, but they say it in a way that shows that they're trying to help solve the problem and get better at, not just to complain, which sometimes it's easy to complain. And they've been doing great this year. So a lot of people who shared things with me, so I appreciate all of the they put as well.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you, all three of you, for taking time to share this. Very helpful to get this insight. Appreciate it.
The more we can share and everybody understands that what we're doing, that helps us keep moving things forward in an efficient way. So anytime, happy to stop by. Thank you. And if there's anything you need as the board, as far as like copies of schedules, hours breakdowns, just don't be afraid to reach out, let us know. We're happy to produce.
Are we
have
sharing
it
with
all.
the board as a whole, this updates?
So I think that's a great question for the committee. How great do you think the interest in the full board is on this topic? I mean, this was about a 30-minute update. It could be reduced, but we knew we wanted to bring this to the curriculum committee because it's kind of core to the purview of the curriculum committee. I think
There's two advantages of doing it. One, the whole board getting the same look or similar look to what we had, but also the community as a whole, as they tune into the meeting and what have you. So maybe modify the time limit a little bit If we're going to do that, I would suggest a handout for each of the board members, so that they can each get a look at that copy. I think that would be helpful. But maybe 15-20 minutes.
And
Oh,
your goals and your growth.
that will be,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
putting together handouts and stuff is not a problem, I just didn't want to. I didn't need to burn through more paper, so I'm happy to put them together. Yeah.
All of our staff, students.
Food for thought, you guys can decide on however, because it doesn't make any difference to me, but do you want to wait till I get some more feedback from staff? to Have an update, or do you want to do the update prior to that?
Yeah, I wondered if after the first semester, if that would be.
Yeah, I don't think we need two for the full board, so maybe that'd be the best time. Once we have a semester worth of input.
I'm happy to come whenever, just. I'll have some more information, we'll have another month or two in, so it might be valuable to get.
Like, I'm thinking, Jeff, a good time might come to. Look at February.
January, February, and when I could do some feedback from staff as we go into like the holiday break. We want to try to speak in January. Do you want to wait till the semester? We could go to February. February might be easier, just to make sure we get everything done and get through the other side of the semester.
Yeah, January seems a little rush with the holiday.
And then also, because we'll have more data by the end of the year, so I don't know if we'll, we'll see if more instructional time and core subjects and how that impacts learning. So that would probably be the presentation for the next fall, right? And that we need.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we will have during the year some preliminary information based on, for example, ready assessments, but that'd only be one measure. By this time next year, we would be able to see where our state assessments had come in.
And probably literacy. Part of that, right?
Yeah, there's the curriculum piece to this. There's the extended time in class piece to this. There's instructional practice piece to this. So a lot of things are all moving in sync, but they're all kind of, in the long run, they're going to have an impact.
I think you're saying, we don't know if we'll be able to say just that is what happened in that class. Now, moving in the right direction, we want to say, yes, adoption of a curriculum, adoption of instructional methods, and like there's a myriad of variables.
Well, the schedule did give us a framework to do those other things. Like we couldn't implement the other curriculum to fidelity with the old schedule. We wouldn't be able to really work on instructional practices in the old schedule. So the schedule is laying the groundwork for us to do all the things we know are good for kids. And so I think, yeah, we'll start to see something soon. I'm been told I'm a little impatient at times, so I have to let the process kind of continue to go, and I'm working on that. Tim's helping me work on that. But yeah, these two people are working very hard as well in different ways with our staff to make sure that instructional practice thing starts to move. So yeah, hopefully we'll start seeing something sooner than later.
It's a fact. We know it's a fact.
Well, and I'd like to congratulate you guys. Your ELA scores this past spring for 8th grade are outstanding. #1 in Dane County is kind of hard to beat. So nice job.
And that was a pilot year.
And that,
Yep.
I was just going to say that.
Sorry, Lynn, didn't mean to steal that from you.
Get a little excited about that particular topic. That's.
We're gonna keep celebrating those things because
Mhm.
it's great when we put a lot of hard work and energy into things like our staff has, and you see some fruits of that labor. So yeah, it is great, and hopefully we keep moving in that right direction, and our growth scores keep moving in the right direction as well, and we have some smile.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
February?
Mhm. Assessment.
Okay, that brings us to the state assessments.
Okay, so actually, when we click into the link, this is a fairly short slide deck, but if you click through the links, and Mark, it sounds like you did, because you noticed the 8th grade number there. We'll have a conversation about that. But I think the key thing to understand, and I think we've mentioned this before, and it's certainly been covered in the news, there were some important changes to the state assessments this year. So one was simply a change in the language used to describe the performance levels. These were intended to be more asset-based names. So a year ago, we would talk about students that were proficient and advanced. And then students who were achieving at levels below proficiency were in a category called basic or below basic. The new language, you're meeting or advanced. Advanced was the only name that was carried over. Basic became approaching, and below basic became developing. So if it was just the change to the names, we could say, well, proficient is meets, and it's, just new labels on the same contents. However,
Before you go on, so someone once said, what's in a name? Rolls by any other with smell of sweet, but my question is, does the new name parallel with the national test, or did the national still go with proficient and basic and advanced?
Meeting Nate.
So I know there's the 4 gradations, but does the state assessment replicate the names used on the national level for the national test, or are we've got our own nomenclature?
yeah, so NAEP has 3 levels,
Okay,
and those were pretty much the old ones. NAEP doesn't have a below basic.
okay,
NAEP has a basic, NAEP has a proficient, NAEP has an advanced. So it's a 3-level system instead of a 4-level system. So that's the first
Okay.
piece. But I think more direct to your question, Mark, is the second point here, which is it wasn't only the change in names. There were some other things going on. So one thing that occurred that's really important for our conversation today is there was a new level setting process for what constituted the at standard level, whether we call it proficient, whether we call it meets. Where is that standard of being, where the state would say we want students to be in ELA and mathematics? So the first thing is, this process did not occur for science or social studies. But second sub-bullet point, our former benchmark for ELA, English Language Arts and Mathematics in Wisconsin, about 12 years ago, was aligned with the NAEP, which is a major national exam, has a very high proficiency level. The thinking in DPI at that time was it was replacing older standards where the benchmarks were really low. And so the NAEP aligned levels were quite high, very challenging. They were higher, so that meant that the state kind of threshold for ELA and mathematics was higher than it was for the other 2 content areas in science and social studies. So DPI went through this process in the last year for ELA and mathematics, and the new level for ELA and mathematics is closer to the 50th national percentile or state percentile. They're very similar, whereas they would be somewhere in the 60s previously. It's lower than the previous NAEP aligned levels. From a consistency standpoint, it did bring them more in line with the existing levels for science and social studies. So, historically, you'd see higher proficiency rates for science and social studies, lower in science, in ELA and mathematics. Didn't mean that students were learning ELA and mathematics less well than they were learning science and social studies. It's just the threshold was different. So because the threshold changed, our percentage of students at meets or better is increasing over proficient or better simply because of the technical change, regardless of any intrinsic change in student performance level that's not part of the technical adjustment. So I mean, that's a reality. So when I think about the presentation that Jeff, Mike, and Lynn shared with us, and thinking about kind of pre-post implementation for the middle school schedule, if DPI had to make this change, I'm glad they made it for the spring of 24 and the spring of 25, because spring of 24 was our last year under the new schedule, under the old schedule at the middle school. So at least we have a new series that reaches back into the old schedule. So what this means is we can't make the long-term comparisons in ELA and mathematics achievement levels, which are our main accountability areas, to earlier data because of these changes. Now, this was also a change to the meets proficiency type levels for the state on the ACT as well. At least with the ACT, though, you still have the same score. It's a 36-point scale before, 36-point scale now. So if your average score went up, you know what that means. When DPI adjusted the forward, they not only for the forward aligned adjusted the levels, they also changed the scale score on the test. So you can't even compare your scale score for the spring of 24 with previous scale scores. So truly, there is no way on kind of a longitudinal basis to really compare it. So what can we do? Well, I think, and this is where our next slide is going to take us, but not quite yet, thank you, Rebecca, we still have a county comparison and we still have our benchmark districts. And all of us were subject to the same change. So, maybe the playing field, maybe we've gone from American rules football to Canadian fields, but everybody's still playing on the same field. So we can look at those rankings, and we will do that in just a moment. The other thing, and the growth data is embargoed, but we'll see that next month as part of our report cards, is the growth data, because of the statistical adjustments that are involved in the growth calculation process, those are comparable. So our challenge is achievement. And I will say something to look forward to is we asked a question of DPI, can you get us grade level growth data? DPI said yes, they've worked really well with us on that. So principals and schools have a little more growth data to work with than they have had previously, just because DPI's really tried to work with districts on the growth data. Any questions about this before we get into the comparisons? Okay, let's go to the comparisons, Rebecca. So let's start with our first link, which should be the Dane County forward data. And so this is a document that shows our percent meets or better compared with all the districts in Dane County. So that's 16 districts in total, including ours. And then if you just scroll down a tidge, you can see on the first line, and it's not quite here, go to row, I think it's row 19, Rebecca. Yeah. The Waunakee rank, and that probably should be more clear. That's our 2024 rank. And then you can see our 2023 rank. And this is for ELA. So this column, because the header is out of sight, this is our total. So this is grades 3 through 8 on the forward, all combined. And then this is each of the individual grades. And so what you see in ELA is, last year we were number 1 in total ELA for Dane County. This year we were number 1 for total ELA in Dane County. That's really great. And you can see, with the exception of 3rd grade, where we went from 2nd to 4th, all of our grade level numbers either were stable or improved. So this is a really good picture. And even though we can't do year-to-year comparison on our achievement data, what this tells us is we're stable or improving in ELA compared to our Dane County peers in ELA. So that's really nice. If you scroll down to the math, Rebecca, and we will want, gently scroll up, we will want, yes, here we go. So if you look at rows 40 and 41, rows 40 and 41, which are down just a bit, you can see that last year we were number 1 for total math in Dane County. This year we were number 1 for total math in Dane County. And you can see that we had some areas move up and some areas move back. So it's a little more mixed there, but again, this is a pretty nice picture. We stayed at number 1. We had 2 areas move up. We had 3 move back, but overall, really happy with where we're at here. And if we go down a little bit more to our science and social studies, again in Dane County, we just need to scroll down a little bit, Rebecca. And this is a long one because for Dane County, we put all of our grade level stuff in. Just go down a tinge more. I want 61 and 60. Awesome. So we can see for total science, last year we were 3rd. We went to 2nd. For social studies, last year for total forward science, we were 3rd. We've gone to 2nd. So that's improved performance. And then you can see kind of how it broke down, within the different grade levels. But again, that's a pretty good picture. If you go back to the agenda, Rebecca, the agenda tab, and you go to, let's keep on the forward data. Let's go down to this benchmarks forward data. This doesn't break down into grade level. This is just going to show our total grades 3 through 8. So you can see these are the 22 districts, including Waunakee, we benchmark against statewide. If we go down to rows 25 and 26, we can see and again, this is out of 22. Last year at ELA, we were 12th. This year we moved up to 10th. Math stayed at 14th. Science went from 14th to 7th. Social studies went from 12th to 8th. So again, against our peers in the state, we have stability in terms of our math rank, and we have improved standing in ELA, science, and social studies on the forward. Mark.
So it's nice to see the growth compared to our peers. But do you have any hypothesis as to why we rank lower to our peer schools than our Dane County comparables?
So you're a big Badger fan, Mark. I think we're all big. Well, one of us is not such a big Badger fan, but that's okay. They do the same thing in Iowa too. So the start of the Badger schedule doesn't look like the Big Ten schedule. You play, leaving Alabama out. You play some. I guess what I want to say is there are big districts and small districts in Dane County. You've got some more urbanized districts. You have some more rural districts in Dane County. You have districts with different characteristics. What they have in common is they're all close to us in Dane County. You look at this group, these districts all are in a similar context. These are all districts that are K-12 of a similar size. The demographics are very similar. A few of these are in Dane County, DeForest, Monona Grove, Oregon. You think academically in Dane County and Middleton Cross Plains academically is in some ways the most similar to us. but Middleton's a lot larger than us. So that's why Middleton isn't on this, but these, from a context situation, demographically in size and grade span, these are the most similar districts to us in the state. So this is a much more comparable group if you follow what I say, Mark. So it is not surprising that we might, if we were 1 or 2 in this group, that would mean something different than being 1 or 2 in Dane County.
Would this be sort of hangover effect from COVID as well, given that it appears outside of Dane County didn't have to go by the virtual approach to education, whereas all Dane County did, or is that, because that's still only
Yeah.
3.5 years
Yeah.
ago.
So that's a possibility. I mean, when we talk about what, I don't want to be dismissive of the biggest thing we have in common with our Dane County neighbors is that we're all in Dane County. I mean, being in Dane County means some things other than simply geography. And I think you brought up a great point there. It does mean that different regions of the state operated differently during the pandemic, depending on what the local county health officials were doing. And so, yes, there are definitely some differences in practices that school systems were allowed to do by their public health authorities during the pandemic.
Did we track the steps? Like, how long have we been tracking?
Benchmarks, long time.
And so are we, is this like a common, we're like middle ground with our peers, or did it really fall during COVID? Or like since COVID?
It's variable. And so like even now, I mean, there's a group of 22. So the 14 in math, this would be lower middle. The 10th, you're really kind of more mid-middle. If you're 7th out of 22, you're in the upper third, bottom of the upper third. But so, I think because it's more comparable, it's certainly a more competitive comparison. I mean, I hate to talk. I probably shouldn't have brought the Badgers into this because now it sounds like I'm talking about standings and things like that. But when you aren't able to compare your longitudinal data, these kinds of relative rankings become some of your best sources of information about what your trend is. So the answer is, in this group, we tend more towards the middle. We're usually not at the bottom. But this is a tough group to lead.
And we've always pretty much been in the middle?
As long as middle's broad.
Yeah.
I mean, if you'd like, what I can do later on is I can get you this information going back a few years and you can.
Would it be, I mean, I would be curious to look at our ranking in 2019. Pre-COVID. And our ranking. And that's one of our.
Yeah.
The thing that we've been kind of striving to measure.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like we have anything.
Yeah, we have that. We can bring it back. Now, again, except for ACT, yeah.
So we talked 18, 19. That's what.
So it would have to be the year before.
But we could look at that. Now, the one caution I'll make, I mean, and this is, I understand what DPI did. Doesn't mean that I might have made the same choice. But, when you look at your longitudinal data, you can compare your performance as a school system, really your students' performance as a school system versus their peers in earlier years. We have a lot of influence over that. Our influence here, we can control this number. And this is why the sports analogy isn't that good. When you're in conference play, if UW beats Iowa, that means something in the standings, or it could go I know it could go the other way, Katie. But, there's no head-to-head for this kind of stuff in a ranking like this. So if everybody improved, you could be doing better. If everybody in your comparative group is improving at the same rate, you're going to hold your position but maybe all of your kids are better off than they were 5 years ago. So, I mean, I think it's definitely a great question to ask. Let's look at the old information. We'll bring that in, but that's just the thing to keep in mind with these comparisons. Rebecca, if we could go back to the agenda and let's pull up the Dane County ACT now. So, again, 16 districts in Dane County, a few different things here. So you've got your composite average on the 36-point scale. We've got the state proficiency rate for ELA and mathematics and science. Then you have a bunch of average scores for the subtests, and way over there's something on the participation. Hey, Colin, we'll be with you in just a moment. Make yourself at home.
Thank you.
If you scroll down, Rebecca, to scroll down, because there'll be a comparative ranking here. Okay, so for composite score, we were number 3 in Dane County in 23. We moved up to number 2. ELA proficiency went from 6th to 4th. Math proficiency went from 4th to 1st. And we were 1st in Dane County for science proficiency in 23. And we continue to be 1st in Dane County for science proficiency in 24. You can see our average scores. They're a little different, but this is where we are on the state proficiency rates. All of them are stable to improve. So our ACT picture, where their Dane County group, stable to improving. Again, pretty positive picture about our trajectory within our local county. Now, Rebecca, if you can go back to the agenda, we'll pull up our peers for ACT. Yep, this one. Now, again, these are, you can kind of see where this is. I mean, I will say some of the PACE leaders. So again, Katie, you were asking about where do we normally come? I mean, another question would be, who typically is setting a pace in this group? Districts that in recent years have set the pace would be Cedarburg. It would be Mequon-Kingsville. And then if you scroll down a little bit, Rebecca, we'll get further down. And then Whitefish Bay is, they're in this group, but they're at the edge of this group in some respects. They are the pace setter. Now, some districts run a little stronger in ELA outcomes, others run a little stronger in STEM outcomes, but let's get to the bottom line. Our average score moved up from 8th out of 22 to 7th out of 22. Our ELA proficiency went from 18th out of 22 to 16th out of 22. Our math proficiency went from 16th out of 22 to 7th out of 22. And our science proficiency went from 5th out of 22 to 3rd out of 22. And then you can see the average scores in here. And again, what you're going to see here is that they were all stable to improved. So again, the total picture against our state comparables is stable to improve performance across the board. Now, ELA is a lagging area for us relative to our peers. I will say we saw upward movement here. We are entering our curriculum renewal process for secondary ELA. And I think, just know that that's an area that's getting attention. Just like last year, and again, it's important to realize we had some pieces going on in mathematics last year, and the ACT takes place typically in early March with about a quarter of the school year to go yet. So some of the things we were implementing last year had only partially had exposure before actually the ACT took. So again, this is a pretty favorable picture, but to your question about the middle, this kind of shows kind of how stretchy that can be, Katie, because we have a 16 here. We also have a 3.
Is the last column a non-participant?
Yes, I do that just to keep that in there because your average scores, are your average scores, but these proficiency rates don't count your kids who don't participate. I think it's just interesting to see, you know,
So 6.6 is that 6.6%?
of our juniors did not participate. And Brian has some ideas about how to work on that a little bit this year, that he's talked with Dr. Brown and myself about. But again, but I will say this, if you could scroll over, and it won't show on here, but this, so we had the highest non-participation rate at 6.6%. There were others that were close. I mean, this is very close. The previous year, I think we're around 8%. So, I mean, it improved, but everybody's improved. So again, I think this is like it's a combination of a post-pandemic thing. It's also the reality that there was a time that the ACT was really a mandated assessment for a lot of college admissions. And all of the districts in our state benchmark group, like us, have very, very high percentages of students continuing on to higher education. So, if you went back 10 years, the ACT was an extremely significant assessment for kind of like long-term impacts for students in this group of districts. That's starting to shift a little bit now that we're in an area of test flexibility for college admissions. Can bring this all back for the year 2019 though, and we'll get that for you. I think the bottom line though is, since we can't track the longitudinal data that well, I mean, we can a bit with ACT scale scores, the comparison to Dane County and our state peers is good news. Nothing really stepped back. Everything was stable. We saw a lot of improvement relative to a lot of other districts that themselves have a lot of things they're trying to do to get achievement back. But this is good news. There's even better news on the next slide. And so this would be our AP data. And again, we have a lot of students who don't take advanced placement exams at the high school. But in our high school, we have about 500 students a year who participate in advanced placement. And we currently don't have any ninth grade courses that are advanced placement courses. So when you see 500, that's 500 out of our 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And that's getting over the 50% participation mark. So the highlights here, so, we talk about post-pandemic return to pre-pandemic performance. Our advanced placement data is something where we can celebrate unambiguously. We have not only returned to pre-pandemic performance, our students are exceeding their pre-pandemic performance. So we see we've kind of plateaued the last few years in the number of total students, right around 500 a year taking at least one AP exam. Our number of total exams almost reached 900, all-time high in the history of our high school. And this is 11 years of data, but I can tell you, going back, this 3 or better percentage pass rate on the AP exam of almost 88% is the highest in the history of our high school. So all-time max participation, all-time pass performance. So, I mean, I think we can be really proud of the work our students who are participating in AP and our teachers who are engaged in our AP courses are doing. Now, that said, this is a big chunk of the high school. It's not all of our students, unlike the ACT data, which is almost all of our students except for the non-participants. But, I mean, I do, when this came through early this summer, it really jumped out as a really strong piece of good news that a lot of things are improving in terms of student academic outcomes. I do think it raises the question of, is the story for our most prepared learners and our students who need more support, is it kind of a stronger story for one context and a message that we need to kind of look at continued improvement for the other context it probably is. But we also need to recognize and celebrate positive developments.
The number itself is impressive, but the fact that we have so many more kids taking the test. And that the number of kids who have gotten a 3 or better has replicated and gone beyond. That speaks highly of what's happening there as well. So.
So that's the spring assessment picture. I guess the question would be, state report cards come off embargo on November 19th. So your November meeting, when we schedule it, we'll bring report card information into you. Do we want to kind of hold on this for the entire board? Is this something the entire board needs to see?
Embargo.
Mhm.
And then also, we're working on shifting what our goals are gonna be because of that change, so if that could all maybe. Not at the same time, but.
No, I think that's great. That's what we've been working on.
I was thinking different on that, though. I thought, one, I think we need to talk about student achievement more frequently than we do at the board. Secondly, I think if we have this understanding ahead of the report card, we're not drowning people in all kinds of assessments. We're, do this first and then the next meeting go with the report card, and I think it'll give us more context for understanding the report card.
So what we're also doing, when I say we, myself, Tim, Tiffany, Lisa, and Amy are working on, we call them our weekly updates, we're talking about the strategy session for having. We're in a good place with that, so creating scorecards for each school. In addition to that, on the scorecard, you will see celebrations, so we have lots to celebrate, as well as opportunities for improvement, including helping the board understand along the way. So for example, Mike, you asked the question, for the middle school, where are we in terms of curriculum, right? All of that, so that you'll have that in front of you. This is a pilot phase for math. This is a full first year of implementation. So we're trying to give you a high level overview with a nice snapshot of where we are in the buildings moving forward. And then creating a progress monitoring chart that we can hand to the board or whoever wants to see it, to let you know how we're making progress along the way. So we know that our state report card is our summative assessment, right? But we'll be able to use Ames Web, we'll start in January, for the lower levels, but also iReady. We created some windows where you want to be able to bring the data to you in the windows to show you how we're going along the way before we get to March, April, March and April to take the state, assessment. So that's the piece that we're working on right now. We're going to bring the principals into the fold because there's a space in there for the principals to be able to meet with their school teams so that they're on the same page. So our hope is to bring it to you since the report cards will be released on November 19th. That's after the November board meeting. So our hope is to bring it to you in December to bring those pieces and starting welcome to the feedback for what that can look like moving forward. So we all know along the way how we're doing in our buildings.
I like Mark's idea of bringing this to our meeting next week.
And that could be a good chance to do the look back to the 2019.
Yeah, if we could include that in those slides. that'd be good. Thank you.
Which brings us to, item number 7, new courses proposal.
Yes.
Thank you for taking time to join us.
Thank you. I'm Lauren Michels. I have been teaching social studies at the high school for the past 5 years. This is my 6th year at Waunakee.
I'm Colin Anderson. I have bounced around a lot in long-term subbing and then been in English the last couple of years, but do have social studies background and licensing. And yeah, she's very excited to come up with these courses.
Yeah, so this journey kind of started with Tim a long time ago, because I think we actually talked about it when you hired me like 6 years ago. And it's taken us this long to find a team and to kind of get some ideas generated and to honestly just go to a lot of PD, which we've been doing over the last couple of years. And we're hoping to set up these 2 electives for next year. We would like to call them cultural studies classes or studies classes because we're going to do a little bit more than just history. We're going to really focus on different aspects of culture and perspectives and storytelling. But the whole kind of purpose of the class is to take a look at American history through the lens of one of the many groups that we have within our population. Our US history class is a very good survey course. I do teach that one, so you may want to check with someone else. I am very biased. But I feel like we do a very good job of encompassing the story of the United States. We try to hit on as many different groups and experiences as possible, but it's just not enough for those who want to know more. And so by proposing these electives, we are giving students the opportunity to, 1, learn about the history of their country from a different perspective, to kind of dive deeper, but also to really act like historians and to practice, all right, what makes a good research question? How do I find that evidence? How do I communicate what I've learned to somebody else? And that's really the purpose of these 2 courses, is to have a higher level elective where it is really focused on that process of being a historian and at examining our really fabulous and rich history in the United States from angles and perspectives that we're not used to being exposed to as much. And so that's kind of the summary. But if you have any questions or would like us to get into details, we have a lot of details that we could share with you.
I think that encapsulates it pretty well.
Yeah, so US history, advanced placement, US history are prerequisites. Are those sophomore levels?
Those are, yes.
And are they year or semester courses?
Both of those are a year. So the thought is that we need students to have some kind of grounding in US history before we can afford to dive deeper, which is why we would love to include a lot of this stuff from this elective in our US history class, but we've got a lot of crap to get through with a lot of things to get through from a lot of different perspectives. And we have to teach skills as well. Whereas with this, because we're narrowing our focus, we can dive deeper. We can get into some of those higher order thinking skills, some more of the creative skills where the focus is more on what students are producing rather than like, can you identify out of these 4 options which one is correct. And
just like you said earlier, like we have really strong survey courses for a foundation of history and US history, but then at the upper level with the juniors and seniors, like having a social studies course that really builds on the craft of a historian, brings in a little anthropology, a little archaeology, a little sociology, and some of those, and how we actually go about investigating topics, digging into very inquiry, working with a lot of sources in a more robust way in a very specific topic that is part and parcel of this larger what is America and all the people and groups within it.
And I think, it's safe to say that these course proposals are being proposed for next year. Down the road, we would anticipate probably 2 more.
yes,
But we're gonna have to see what's involved in terms of,
yes.
will this be in a year, we'll see 2, or in 2 years, we'll see the next 2. That's kind of TBD.
Is that Asian American Studies, Latin American Studies?
Yes.
Yes, that is the plan.
Yes. So the idea when it's complete is that we should have a rotating semester or a rotating schedule where every other year in the fall runs American Indian Studies. Every other year in the spring runs African American Studies. And then the next year is the Latino and Asian American experiences. And so that is the vision. We're getting buried by logistics and don't know if we're going to be able to get that rolled out in 2 consecutive years is kind of the timing. But we want to make sure that all of our students feel represented, seen, heard, that there's a class for them, but also we just don't have very many history electives. We have a lot of really great social studies electives, psych, soc, economics, all of these different things, but we don't have a chance as an upper level student to really dig into history. And so that was another reason that we thought that this was a good idea moving forward.
And when that cycle is completed, when that happens, it would be amazing for students to have an opportunity if they wanted to through junior and senior year to do the cycle of all 4 of them
Yes.
through the 4 semesters that they have.
I want to compliment you on the vision you guys had in creating this. I mean, I looked at the courses. I've done quite a bit of reading about Native American historical things through fiction and nonfiction, and the breadth that you cover is really comprehensive. I'd say the same thing with the African Americans segment and incorporating different aspects of the culture. So I can see where it'd be an extremely enriching opportunity for the kids and to be able to do this over 2 years. Even if they could only, pick 2 of the 4.
Yeah.
What an exciting thing. And I had a good friend who was a history teacher, and so I can appreciate the frustration. How do you get everything in? He once said, if we have 1 more snow day, won't be able to finish history. And
Well, that and we keep creating more history every year.
but this is a really, I think, creative and focused way to bring greater richness to the U.S. history experience for our kids. So really nicely done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there an additional cost? How does that work? That, we're adding 2 new courses. So I'm pushing that out.
So there'll probably be some cost in terms of curricular resources, but these are not the, I think Lauren and Colin would be the first to say there is a tremendous amount of teacher research that has to go into developing this. You can't go out and buy a good textbook for a semester course in this for the high school.
Not unless you're looking at collegiate level text. So really more of our thing is that through I was looking at copyright laws because of course I was, but through copyright laws, as long as we are using a portion, we can make copies. And so it would probably be a lot of like authors and books that we have like a collection of things that we take kind of more like what they do for English. So instead of like a textbook or even a class mandated like novel or something like that, it would probably be more things like, all right, we are in charge of curating the readings that everybody needs for X time period, and then you are responsible for renting out a library book or finding a documentary or, and kind of deepening your history that way. So we don't really see.
Yeah, because it also correlates with the kind of the research process and like being the historian and drawing from a lot of sources is very much primary source dense. And then also when we're working with secondary sources, they're more excerpts from works of different other historians. I don't think we mentioned it, but we really want to center the narratives from the communities as much as possible in our primary sources and in our secondary sources, because we don't belong to these communities. We want them to be able to work with the voices from those groups as much as possible. And so it's going to be a lot of pulling together a lot of sources, which won't be a single textbook or any of that. And so, yeah, we'll be working on compiling that.
I would say I would love, because we have the UW right nearby, to have some sort of guest lecturers or, historians or people in the community. I have some contacts in Ho Chunk, but if we were able to like bring in guest speakers and just for our classes or have them in for the day or Zoom in or whatever, there may be that is one of the costs that I could potentially hype up, but that's also a thing that happens in a lot of other classes. I think that's that would be an exception for this. And then if we could go
Potential
on.
community engagement,
engagement,
just because we want to work with and connect with the community that we have here for all of these courses. So that would probably be in flux depending on what's going on in a particular year.
Yes, but I cannot see any, like, there's no equipment, I don't think that we'll need, no specific spacing needs, no specific materials. Maybe I'll buy another map, but I think that my I think my social studies budget can cover that. So I really don't see that much additional funding needing to be
I
done.
was just curious.
Yeah, it's a question we always need to ask, but I think they've offered a great answer. From a staffing standpoint, we'll just have to kind of see how registrations turn out. My hunch would be we'll probably see a section or two less of social problems, and it'll all probably work out. But that's kind of my guess. We'll see.
That would be my guess too. I would guess that we have a little bit less numbers in sociology, psychology, and maybe pulling some from other courses, but I have a feeling running like 1 to 2 core sections per year is not going to be that much more than, sorry. That came out a little bit twistier than I had imagined, but I don't anticipate that this is going to be like a sports site where we're gonna have 7 sections of it or something like that. This will probably be a smaller elective would be the guess.
Yep.
So you need a motion?
We
To
need
go
a
forward,
motion.
yep.
I support this, so I.
All in favor? Aye.
I think this is a way that we can do our things. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm excited about it.
We're very excited.
You've worked awfully hard to get to this point, and so thank you.
Are there any other questions or queries?
I do have one, and not trying to say it needs to be done, but is there the potential to make this a non-AP course where you get AP credit for it based upon the depth of research that you do, or how does that work?
Great question.
Is a good question.
So yeah, this course is kind of like a non-AP course is kind of how we've designed it. It is for students who want to stretch themselves and stuff like that. However, the only AP course that could conceivably be worked in is either a student could self-study for AP Afro-American Studies, and then take the test with our course kind of supplementing that, which I don't see very many students doing, nor would I recommend it. You should probably take the whole course. Or 2, there is a thing called an AP seminar. However, the AP seminar, it has anchor texts every year, and those anchor texts are randomly assigned. And
they vary
wildly. They would be phenomenal if it worked to have those kind of dovetail with the course. That might be something that we could offer students based on the mentor or required text of the year. But if it doesn't match up, then there's really not an option that I know of to get them AP credit.
No, also English 10 is examining
Yes,
AP seminar as a possible connection.
which would be a better fit for it. Just because English 10 can sub out text a little bit easier. I can't talk about microbiology in my African American Studies course, and place that in history very well. Like that was one of the year's texts, was like microorganisms and microbiology and how minor things have bigger impacts. I'm like, wow, that's awesome, and will not fit in the scope and sequence of this course. So we really wanted to make AP work, but it just, and there's not really an option for something like this yet, unless it is AP African American Studies, and they don't really have much other than that. But that is a year-long course,
Yeah.
would require a textbook. It's very different from what we're proposing.
Okay. Thank you.
Great question, though. Thank you for asking.
We will need some time to set up the.
Right, so, I mean, I think, we may be a little time limited in looking ahead to scheduling future meetings, but if we could at least, and I guess I would say, again, thank you, Lauren, thank you, Colin. And, you're welcome to stay for meeting scheduling, and I know you've taught a full day, and for some of you, it might be a big week as well. So, if you need to get on your way, we certainly understand. So,
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you
your
very
time.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
so if we could at least get the November meeting scheduled, but you need some downtime as a committee before the levy setting meeting, which is coming up in about a half hour, and I just don't. So, I think the big thing looking ahead for November is the report cards come off embargo on the 19th.
Yep.
Makes no sense to have this committee meeting before they come off embargo. So, kind of, the 19th is the Tuesday of the week before Thanksgiving. Maybe we could get it in just before Thanksgiving, or maybe it's better to have this meeting the first week in December, right before the board meeting. I think those are really where our options would fall.
So, or Mondays and Wednesdays are separate.
Mondays and Wednesdays, I think you had decided amongst yourselves would be the preferred.
Looking at the same time. period,
Mhm.
Even though it's good watching.
I apologize, I didn't hear the case.
Monday the 2nd or Wednesday the 4th.
Yep, it works.
Whatever.
Let's do the Monday.
So December 2nd.
Yes, Monday, December 2nd.
3:00.
You want to try for a January meeting, or should we get to that at the December one? Words of wisdom.
Yeah. Are we ready to?
I'm sorry. Try that again.
Are we ready to adjourn?
I think we're not gonna do anything for January.
No.
I think we're gonna wait and see how trends develop.
Okay, sounds good. Then we do need a motion to adjourn.
So, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.